Well, hello there, my beloved USU community. This is Julie, and I am really, really, really excited to have this conversation today. You are going to get to meet a very, very dear friend. Robert Murray is super humble and also super brilliant and has a lot of wisdom. So let me tell you about Robert, and then you're going to get to meet him yourself. Robert Murray is a certified high performance coach and master faculty exchange facilitator. He is leading the XJet movement exponentially to increase the levels of joy, engagement, and teamwork in today's new generation of organizations, and I would say in your life as well. He leads events where organizations see a much bigger vision for themselves, develop massive gains in engagement, and rapidly develop new ideas. He fosters collaboration, crowdsourced wisdom, and a magnification of collective strengths. He has facilitated hundreds of powerful conversations and events in organizations such as Organifi, State Farm, Google, ProMatch, DaoCloud, and many, many others. Robert is one of my favorite people on the planet and just an overall sweetheart and really special guy. Robert, I'm so happy to have you here today. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I was commenting that I never seem to get enough Julie time, so this is a great chance to just rap with one of my favorite people in the world.
You are so sweet. I know every time we get together, I'm like, that was awesome, but I need more, I want more time to connect. I think since day one, we were like nonstop. There's always so much to talk about. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
absolutely.
Well, one of the questions I always like to start out with is kind of this concept of being your USU, living into it, right? You could define it as most authentic self, higher self. Tell us a little bit about your USU, Robert. What does that mean to you? What are some of those values, ways of living today that really help to shape your USU?
You know, it's interesting because just when you asked the question, I was thinking of, I call it my gazebo moment. Because one of the things that I wonder about, particularly me coaching people, is why is it so difficult to understand what our USU is, like what the essence is?
Yeah.
And it took me back to my gazebo moment when I was sitting outside, with like tears streaming down my eyes because I finally realized what it is that I cared about. And I think partly it was the recognition of what it was that I cared about. And partly it was like, wait, that was so simple. Why did it take me so long to figure out what it is that I care about? And so the two things that I realized in that moment was that it really is focusing on some higher aspirational mission that everybody cares about, like doing something that was outside of me that changed the world. And then the second part of that was doing it in a team of people that I love. And it's funny because if I say those two elements and you knowing me a little bit, you could be like, of course, of course, that's what Rob would care about. But I don't know. It took me 2 years of wandering in the wilderness before I actually realized that and had to have that giant breakdown and that epiphany before it came to me.
Oh, first of all, I love your words and metaphors. I'm like, well, maybe you were in the wilderness. I'm not sure. Were you?
I was looking at the, over 4 acres with a beautiful pond and a fountain in the background. And, luckily sitting by myself because I know that I was doing one of those like deep sobs that people would wonder, like, what is going on with this guy?
Wow. If you're comfortable, can you share a little bit about, I think it's important for people to hear about our breakdowns and, how, I know with you're such an eternal optimism and positivity about you. And one of the things I love about you also is how real and vulnerable you are as well. And you're just wanting to learn from everything. So I'm curious, maybe just to share about that breakdown and what happened, what was going on, and what are the gifts from that?
Yeah, well, the breakdown came when I was probably about a year or two into a period of unemployment that I thought would never happen in my life because I had started a company with a group of my friends that was based around these two elements, was based upon an aspirational mission that if you focused on doing the right thing, and if you focused on treating your customers and your suppliers with ethics and eliminating the cost of bad behavior in the organization, that you didn't really have to focus on money, that the business would take care of itself. And we started the business to prove that theory, not to sell automotive parts, which is what we were doing at the time. And it worked so well that we grew from literally a startup to $200 million in business. And you'll get the connection with why I'm doing the work that I'm doing today. But we, at some point, when we started going in that parabolic growth curve, we were growing $20 million a year, year after year. Every year it was a $20 million increase, which was huge. And we asked a question, which was, wow, we've gotten from zero to $200 million so fast. This is great. How do we get to $500 million? And I realized that, in hindsight, now that I'm doing work with XChange and with the XJet facilitation, that we asked a question that was close to the mark, but the wrong question. And the power of questions to direct our mind and how important it is. Yeah. The question that we should have asked in that moment was, what have we been doing right that enabled us to grow from zero to $200 million that we need to keep doing in order to continue our growth? You can see the difference. First question focused on money, focused on results. Second question would have, had we asked the question, focused on building upon the strengths that we already had and continuing to do what was right. So in that situation, when we said we really don't know how to grow to $500 million, we've never done it before. Reality is we had no idea how to get to 200 million either, but we did that. But so we said, oh, well, let's just invite some consultants in who have grown companies to $500 million, and they'll tell us how to do it. And so they came in and they said, oh, this thing that you're doing where you're getting everybody's opinion and everybody's feedback and you're making decisions by consensus and you're sharing ideas, it takes too long. You can't do that. Management has to go into a room, they have to lock the door, they have to come up with a strategic plan, and then they should tell everybody, here's what we're doing, people. And what happened over the course of about a year and a half or 2 years is that those consultants, once invited in, realized the lack of business savvy, I guess, that some of us had in getting to the 200 million, and found a way to engineer a takeover of the company and basically push all of those who had founded the company out. And so my gazebo moment came at the end of a period of having been pushed out of a company that I founded with my friends, having 20 years of my life where I didn't know I was working a day of my life, and feeling as though I lost my family, my sense of purpose, my direction, kind of my North Star in life at that point was gone. And I was sitting out in the gazebo at that point of the breakdown, like, what am I going to do with myself? Like, I have no idea. I never thought I'd have to look for a job. I don't know how to look for a job. I never thought I'd be in the situation that I'm in. What do I do now? And through that long period of introspection and actually just starting to come out of it and asking myself, what is it that I really care about? What do I want to do with my life? I realized it was those two elements of the higher aspirational mission and connecting with people that I loved.
Wow. 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 I think that is, there's a lot to unpack there. I think one of the most important things you said, and, for those listening, Robert, you and I met through XChange, through the work with John Berghoff and the whole community around asking, really this modality around asking questions that are generative, that are life-giving, that help us to thrive. And I was thinking, my gosh, like the power of words and questions, if you had shifted that a little bit, you probably would have gotten a very different answer, which may have shifted the, not had you hire that company or have you do different things.
Yeah.
I'm curious because I'm thinking, and I know you also have this incredible background as a coach, a master coach. You've done a lot with Brendon Burchard's work as well, and you've coached many incredible people. For those listening, and I think this is really important, we are speaking to ourselves and asking questions of ourselves all the time. And where do people start when, if you notice a result you have that you don't like, where would you start with that? Because I feel like that's something many of us deal with, right? Like, and actually, I also am curious, put that on pause for a second, because back to the gazebo moment, how did you start to get yourself out of that space of breakdown mode? What helped you to turn that around?
Actually, it's funny because that was how I started coaching inadvertently.
Mm,
What happened was, because I had no idea what to do and I had no idea how to deal with unemployment, I had decided, well, I had a second moment, which, I guess breakdowns come, they're continual until you decide to turn things around. And this might answer the second part of your question as well.
yeah.
I remember standing at the doorway of my bedroom, not long after the gazebo moment came, and I looked at my bed, and I was so sad with where I was in my life and so depressed that I saw the bed, and I really want to just crawl up in the middle of the bed in a ball and not come out.
Yeah.
And then I remember I turned to the living room and I looked out the door and I said, or I could get out the door and engage with people, even though I feel like a little piece of trash right now, like I can't really do that. And I chose to go out the door.
Mm,
And one of the things that involved going out the door was starting a meetup group with a bunch of people who were in job search mode. And this, by the way, was in the crash of 2008, 2009, in the height of that. And so I started meetup group and I started listening to people's stories. And there were people who were going to lose their house. They couldn't feed their kids anymore. I mean, it was not a good time for a lot of people in the country. And I realized that I wasn't probably ever going to starve. I wasn't probably ever going to be homeless in this situation because of the level of friends that I had. And so I started helping them. And in helping them, I started pulling myself out of the depression, because it's like one of the first things I'd recommend to people now. If you're feeling really crappy about what's going on in your life, start going out and helping other people.
yeah.
But that was so healing to me that it kind of got me into the whole profession, the whole personal development arena and the element of coaching.
Wow. Wow. So it's so interesting, because I've certainly had those moments. I'm sure anyone listening has had that moment where it's like, seriously, I'll be honest, there are times I have gone into my bed and it's hard to get up. I've had those moments.
Yeah.
And I love that it's like, it's such that was such a crucial choice. And just to be able to see that that you were able to turn it around, and by helping others and probably being of service. What's so interesting to me is, I don't know, would you have gone into coaching, into this work, had that not happened? Right.
Oh,
Because yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That was the gift in it. Cause I mean, like, I had no idea the power that coaching had, and I certainly had no idea of the power to heal.
Right.
So if you're a coach, it's weird, but I think you tend to go in to heal some of the wounds that you've had.
Mhm.
And it's what pulls you out of it. Like, it's the thing that, now is driving me. It's like, you always have to stay a couple steps ahead of your clients. Now, you don't have to be perfect ever. First of all, that's not even possible, but it's also almost better in some ways if you have gone through the things that you're helping people through, because you can relate, you can have empathy with the clients, and you can understand what they're going through. Like, oh, just, like, that's silly. Don't crawl into bed. Just go out and do the work. Like, you can do it. They don't need a cheerleader at that. They need somebody that's understanding that place of just like really wanting to be curled up in a ball, and the difficulty of the decision of choosing to go out the door. But you also want somebody who's done it and says, here's the way out the door.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so well said. Before, I want to talk about XChange and what your vision is, but one thing for people, I think, look, when I started coaching, and I wonder this for you too, I mean, it had just started to be a thing. I mean, it was not what it is today. I think it is, and gratefully it's taken off. For those that are kind of newer to it or don't really know, can you share a little bit about what you feel the power of coaching, and what you've gotten from it, and how you feel like you've helped people kind of move through limited beliefs or doubts or breakdowns?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I've often shared with people the power of coaches. And it's funny because I at this point in my development or evolution as a coach, I have 3 active coaches right now. And I've hired coaches for things as crazy, if you want to call it this, crazy as being okay with myself and loving myself without external acknowledgement. You know, like I hired a coach specifically for that. And by the way, she was awesome and it worked. So, I mean, like completely worth hiring a coach. But I think that is the power of coaching, is that for each one of us, we get so trapped in our own worlds and inside our own boxes that we can't help ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't see what's going on. We can't see the obvious thing right in front of it. Like if somebody had been able to put into words in my gazebo moment without having had a year and a half of searching in the wilderness, if somebody could have given me that clarity 5 months or 4 months or 3 months into that period, I could have been in action for a year and a half. And I think that's the power of coaching, is that the person's enough out of the muck and enough out of the crazy stuff that's going on in your head that they can walk you out of it and say, oh, look, right over here, I know you're feeling really, really bad right now, but if you actually just get up out of the mud and stop looking at the ground and look up, there's a whole world of opportunity waiting for you. Why don't you take a couple steps toward that world opportunity? And you're like, oh, wow, okay, there's a better world out here outside of this mud puddle that I'm looking at.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just what I'm hearing you really say and reflect back is it can help you change your entire paradigm. It can change your perspective. It can, and I think, and this is part of the power of what questions we ask, which I think gets into, you know, the work that you and we do with XChange is, you know, those new questions, those someone asking that, are you asking yourself the minute you ask it, it's like the change already happens, which is so powerful. Talk a little bit. So what got you into XChange, and then talk about XJet, because I love what you've created and kind of how that came about.
Yeah, well, XChange came about, you know, part of my searching in the wilderness. So after you know, starting to get into coaching and fixing my mindset a little bit, I started getting a series of better and better jobs. And that was when it was actually, I was in the corporate world again, strangely enough, working for a competitor of the original company that I had founded. And I was leading a team of 12 people and setting up an office in China and leading that team. And so I decided to certify as a coach, which was pretty interesting. But my mission in that company was to transform the supply chain so that the company could be ready for sale. So I come back, I'm all certified as a coach. I'm excited to get out in the world and do it. And I tell the CEO who I was reporting to, hey, I'm ready to coach now. I'm ready to get the team really all settled in and on board. And he's like, oh, yeah, we're going to sell the company in just about 6 months. Make the numbers look good. Don't worry about developing the people. And I'm like, oh, damn, you know. So what I did was I offered coaching to the people who were reporting to me. And one guy who was the lowest paid guy on my team said, hey, I would love to have coaching. And so because it wasn't sanctioned by the company, we went out for sushi for, you know, a period of weeks. And I took him through the coaching model. And it was transformational for him. I mean, it's funny because I've followed up with him. I've stayed in touch, and the way he's turned his life around as a result of this, like, it's just unbelievable. So I could see the power of coaching in that moment. So anyway, fast forward to the company gets sold. And they told me right up front that there was a good chance that when the company got sold, you know, they can't make any promises for the new owners, whether I'd have a job or not. Turned out that they decided they didn't need me. And so I drove out to California because all of Brendan Burchard's training was out here. And as I was at one of his trainings, I'm like, you know what? I think it's time to leave the corporate world. And I think it's time to go into coaching because that makes a bigger difference. So I literally packed up all the stuff that I could fit in my car, drove out from Minnesota to California, and reinvented myself as a coach and an entrepreneur. Wow. So I went through a period of discovery because the good news for me was that when the company got sold, I had a small equity stake in the company, which gave me runway to go into that reinvention. And part of the reinvention was going to Hal Elrod and John Berghoff's Best Year Ever blueprint. in 2015. And so when I got there, I remember the co-founder now of Flourishing Leadership Institute, Scott Lowry, got up and he was talking about business being an agent of change for good in the world. And I'm like, tears streaming down my eyes, because you can imagine after what happened to me with the original company that I thought, okay, we had this crazy idea that was way ahead of its time. It's too early. Nobody else believes that business is for anything except for making money. And I had a high degree of skepticism. And then, of course, I went into a job that I loved, but private equity owned companies, they care about making money, right? So I didn't think there were any companies in the world or any organizations in the world that cared about making a difference in the world. And here's this guy on stage talking about making a difference in the world. And I'm like, oh, I found my people. And so I raised my hand, and I think I was the first voice in the audience at the Best Year Ever event, and said, oh my gosh, what you just said had such an impact on me. And that was before XChange even existed. That was back in 2015. So you can imagine that then that connection with, oh my gosh, I found my tribe again, made me stay in touch with both Scott Lowry and John Berghoff, and of course the entire Miracle Morning and Hal Elrod community. And then when XChange was announced in 2017, I'm like, I'm in.
Awesome. My gosh.
So,
Amazing. Yeah. And I can imagine for you, having gone through such a traumatic experience in the business world, both with your own company, and then to be in that the second one that was like, just don't worry about the people, just deal with the numbers. I mean, those of you, if you can't tell, Robert, you're one of the most like heart-centered, empathetic, caring human beings I've met and known, truly. And it's interesting. The contrast is so great of that, and then who you are and what you're doing now. And I think it's really important to note that it took some serious courage. Like, it had to take a lot of courage for you to pick up from Minnesota to California and reinvent yourself. And I just honor you for that courage. And, for those that are like on the fence or just fearful, like, what was there anything in addition to the runway, extra resources, what else helped you to step into that massive change?
So there's two things. I'll tell you the vulnerable, sad part of it too, is that I commented, 2 or 3 years into my reinvention that if anybody knew what it actually took to make a reinvention from the corporate world into being a solo entrepreneur, if they actually knew the work and the time and the effort that it would take, they probably wouldn't get into it, and a lot less companies would be started. Because the reality was, I went out with a lot of my friends said it was super brave and like, wow, that was really bold. Because I literally moved out to California with no set of friends, no job, no family out here. I mean, I had no support system. Like, what could go wrong, right? So yes, bravery, but I think there was an element of lack of knowledge too, which I've since closed that knowledge gap, which has been really good. But I think that the other thing that's the one that really counts is that I had, for the 20 years that I was working on that original company, a situation that was so unbelievably joyous and so in flow and so inspiring that I literally didn't know I was working for a full 20 years. And it wasn't until I'd lost that I realized that that situation is not the reality for most people in the working world.
Yeah.
And I knew it was possible because I'd been living it for 20 years. And that force of driving me, it's like, guys, this is so much better over here. It's so much better to be living every day with joy, with meaning, with purpose, with a focal point, with people that you love. Why wouldn't everyone want to do that? So I think that really fundamentally has driven me for everything else that I've done. It's like the driving force. It's like there's a wrong in the world that needs to be righted. The level of disengagement, the level of disconnection that people have, the level of dissatisfaction they have with their job, it doesn't have to be that way. And because I had such a powerful example of how it wasn't that way, I want to share the new way with as many people as possible.
Awesome. That is, it's really well said. And I'm thinking, this is one of the there's a whole model that we learn. There's a lot of models within Exchange, but for those, for if you're tuning in and you're like, why have I never had that before? Maybe the question could be, when was there a time where you did feel in flow in a career or even volunteer, and look to see what was it that was going on there and pull from that? Because you did that. You had 20 years of that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody has one. That's the cool thing, is that no matter how, I shouldn't say everybody, but like, no matter how bad jobs are, if you think about, maybe not even in the work world, but there's always a period in everybody's life where they felt really connected to something that mattered to them, and they felt connected to a team. And if you can tap into that, it's like, how can I get more of that in my life?
Yeah. Love it. So let's talk about all that you're now creating. I love your concept of XChat. Can we tell us about that? What it stands for, what your focus and hope is with what you're creating, your vision, like all of it.
Yeah. So XChat stands for Exponential Improvements in Joy, Exponential Improvements in Engagement, and Exponential Improvements in Teamwork. So XChat. And it wasn't something that, I'd love to say I was clever enough to do it. I actually was just posting something in the Exchange community at one point, and then one of the members said, well, you're constantly talking about joy, engagement, and teamwork. Why don't you call it JET? And I'm like, oh, I love that. Yeah. So that's really how it came about. And what it really is taking the thriving culture. And now I've since found, and that's one of the reasons why, and you and I both love Organifi and Organifi products and stuff. But
oh yeah.
It wasn't even that long ago that, like a year ago or so, I went down there, and the director of HR, Lisa, was giving us a little class on it. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I don't know if you saw me, you might have been in the room at the same time. Like, I got up and excused myself and went to the bathroom. And the reason was because tears were running down my eyes, because I felt for the first time since leaving that original company, the level of joy in an organization. Like, the people who are working there, they really loved working there. They really wanted to be there. And she was talking about how great their retention rate is and how happy people are. And I'm like, that's what I want. I want more companies, because now I realized it wasn't just a purple unicorn. I don't know what term you want to use for it.
Yeah. I love
the company that I originally had, like, okay, most companies don't have very thriving cultures, but there are companies that do. Yeah. And how can we take those companies that do have thriving cultures, learn the best of what that they're doing, and share it with as many other organizations that know that they want it, but they also know that they don't have it, as possible. So XChat really is about providing a level of coaching, support, facilitation, and even knowledge sharing with some of these experts who have what's working, and share it with the organizations that want it, so that they can increase the level of engagement, teamwork, and joy within their organization.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. Should we give a shout out? Who came up with that idea, in case he or she's listening, if you want?
Oh, gosh, now it's Sajal.
Oh, Sajal. Nice.
Yeah, Sajal.
Awesome. All right,
yeah.
Sajal, if you're listening,
yes.
Shout out.
So Sajal, good shout out to you, our fellow Canadian. Awesome. Yeah. Speaking about people, and I'm just going to shout out to the entire Exchange community, like, you're part of it as well. But
amazing.
I can't describe how awesome everybody in the community is, and the amount of world-changing initiatives that each of them is doing. Sajal is a perfect example of, she's transforming mental health for people, particularly in the police and fire and military arenas. But I mean, there are so many people, and I can just go, Jesse Harless transforming for recovery. It's just like one person after the other.
Oh, absolutely.
Who is just making some world-changing. It's a great family to be part of.
It is. It's one of the places where, no matter where you're from all over the world, what sector or area or focus or career you're in, it's one big-hearted group of people that are up to big, big things, impact, change, just making a positive difference in the world. That's, like, to say it mildly. And I feel like it's a constant hug the whole time. It is One of my favorite. No, I love, very grateful
Yeah.
for the community to have met you through there.
Yeah.
One of the last, before we wrap up, for some reason, my intuition is saying, to just connect for a moment. As human beings, you talked about it before with breakdowns, and I'm just thinking, if someone's listening and they feel like they're in a bit of a breakdown, maybe it's in their career or around their health or around a relationship, maybe just pulling from your experience both with XChange and being a master trainer and coach. What advice or wisdom can you give to someone who feels like they're in a really rough spot, they're in a breakdown? Like, what would you, maybe a couple action steps or things you would have them do? Because I would imagine, that's human, and
Yeah.
could always use more wisdom on how do you handle that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you might have heard me make this framework. I tell a lot of my coaching clients this saying, and it's not necessarily appreciative in the tone, but people get it quick, which is there's always a gift in the shitstorm.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. It's like there's always a gift.
Yeah.
And so what's happened is I've trained myself. So like you brought it out, that, okay,
Yeah.
I went through this period of losing something that was extremely important to me and feeling depressed and sad and everything, but I wouldn't be doing what I am doing today had that not occurred. So there's a
Yeah.
pretty huge gift in that thing that felt really bad. So what I would share with people if they're having a breakdown right now is first stop running. And this sounds weird to say this first, but like let it suck, let it hurt.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I realized is that my running away for 2 years, like the reason it took me 2 years of depression and feeling lost in the wilderness was because instead of embracing it and feeling like, yeah, this really sucks, I don't want to be where I'm at right now, and I don't want to be in this situation, I was constantly running away from it and avoiding thinking about it and trying to do everything else but.
Yeah.
And the reality is, for me, I just got sad and depressed. Some of my friends who went through exactly the same thing turned to alcohol abuse and came within days of dying as a result of alcohol abuse. Some of them turned into drug abuse and came in with days of dying for drug abuse. I mean, that's what normally happens when you're trying to avoid pain of something that is severe like that. So it's really just to embrace it, because, the old saying, the only way to move, to move through something or to go through it is like go through, I think the saying is something like, if you're going through hell, keep going, like just go through that thing and really embrace the pain for a while. But then also don't buy into the story of victimhood. So as you're going through that pain, you can choose to think of yourself in that story as a victim, which means, gosh, I can't do anything about it. I'm a victim. I have to wait for external circumstances to change before the situation changes. And the reality is that as soon as we are aware of what's going on with us, we then have a choice, and we don't have to play the role of victims. We can see ourselves as, within that, the framework of the hero's journey. It's like, oh, we just were in the village and life was good, and the dragon just came and burned down the village, and this really sucks. And I'm going to look at the debris of my lost village and my home, and I have two choices. I can cower and feel mad and curse my life and curse the dragon for the rest of my life, or I can get up and I'm going to go vanquish that dragon. Like I'm going to go on the epic quest and I'm going to deal with this thing.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you can identify what that is for you, what that hero's journey is, what those steps are for you that you need to take, and if you start taking those steps in forward motion and looking to help other people, then it just leaves that wreckage behind. And it's like, okay, this was bad. This is going to be better. I'm going to start marching towards better. And it's just one foot in front of the other.
I love that. I love that. That's awesome, Robert. Thank you. I always love any way to kind of reframe or look at tough stuff, because we're going to have that as human beings. That's how we're designed. No perfection.
It's going to happen again, and that's the cool thing too, is so like, I know Hal Elrod talks about the 5-second rule, which I love, when you have, because mean, I have it constantly, right? Like if it rains, when my sister comes to visit for Thanksgiving and I want to show her a great time in Monterey and then it's pouring out, right? It's like, oh, okay, this sucks,
Right.
but can I reframe it into what's beautiful about this as quickly as possible? So it
Yeah.
just, like we're always going to feel these human reactions. And the trick is, how can we reframe it in our mind and shorten the time that we're feeling bad about it and shorten the time before we get into positive action?
Mm, awesome. Oh my gosh. You so much to share. I love anytime I get to spend with you. And I know everyone who's listening in is going to be better off for it. And it's one of the reasons I was like, you just have a lot of gifts and a lot of strengths and wisdom and experience that you have reframed. And I think it's one thing to go through a really awful breakdown. It's another when you can come out stronger and more connected to who you really are and there to serve. And that is so you. And you're
Yeah.
just it's just going to get better and better, which is
Oh
awesome.
yeah. Well, I mean, and the funny thing is, like, literally, I feel like XJet is just taking off.
Yeah.
Like all these things, and it was funny because you were mentioning intuition. Like I've just been going on where I should focus my attention based on intuition, and
Mm,
I was joking over the last 2 months or so. It feels like I've hired a super high-end event planner that's perfectly orchestrating my life and the timing and who I meet and what I do and when I do it. And whoever that event planner is needs a raise, because like it's really like first class event planning. And so I don't know if you call it God, universe, spirit, whatever you want to call it, but like there's some higher power. But when you start tapping into that flow and intuition, it's like can be really fun. It's really fun.
it's so great. It brings joy, exponential joy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's to intuition. Yeah. We'll have more on that to come and more episodes, but I love that you brought that in. So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
You are such a superstar and such a I would say exponential joy activator. That's what I would call
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Exponential joy activator. Okay. I don't know. That doesn't spell what I thought it would, but that's okay. That's all right. It's off the cuff. I can't, I'm not that good. That's why I'm not. Yeah. I so appreciate you, Robert, for all that your heart, your just gracious time and sharing your stories and who you are. And it's an honor to have you here and just share you with our community and beyond.
Cool. Cool. Yes. I certainly enjoyed whatever time I get to spend with you. I will always take you up on that opportunity.